welcome to Youngest Lady the One YouTube channel. If this is your first time on my YouTube channel, please subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking on the red subscribe button down below and turn on the bell icon. Tell me what you think about this video in the comment section.
So yesterday we heard from the official opposition party in Zambia on these developments. Tonight we speak to the governing party, which is United Party for National Development. Their media director, Mr. Mark Simuuwe, joins us now. Mr. Simuuwe, good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. You were able to see that discussion I had yesterday with the Patriotic Front's Secretary General. And one of the things that he said, and you hear him in that clip, the current president, even when he was in opposition, never recognized President Lungu as a Republican president, saying to do so now is hypocritical. What do you say to that statement?
Thank you very much, lady. I think what should be contextualized is the background to the proposition that is being advanced by the opposition Secretary General Nakachinda. You may wish to recall that in 2016, general elections in Zambia, elections were rigged and there was a contestation which was brought before the Constitutional Court. And as if that wasn't enough, President Hichilema was denied the right to be heard. This is news that was all over. And in a quest for him to propagate for justice, we sought a number of systems of recourse which could not bring out the results that were desired. And in the process, what you saw was President Edgar Lungu then arresting President HH for more than 3 months, which is about 127 days. He's the only opposition leader who has ever been arrested and locked up, locked up in a particular prison cell in a humiliating manner for such a time. Now, that is on record. The difficulties that we had that time was that elections were rigged and that it was unacceptable that we could have a president, again, dubiously sworn in. The Constitution would require that the Chief Justice swears in the president-elect. You may be wondering how that was undertaken. Instead, President Edgar Lungu was sworn in by an acting registrar of the High Court. All those are legal discrepancies that we had misgivings on. And based on that, we believed that a lot of things were not done correctly. But that aside, that is not the issue. The issue here is that a matter of a legal nature, to start with, is being taken as a political matter by our colleagues. From whatever angle you look at it, when the swearing was done, Edgar Lungu was given the instruments of power. He had to undertake activities that are enshrined in the Constitution and due to the president as his functions. And when the time was ripe for President HH to win, Edgar Lungu handed over the instruments of power to President Hichilema. And today, as we speak, President HH is President of the Republic of Zambia. Now, the question we need to ask ourselves is, what is the position of the Zambian system with regard to a former head of state who dies? We have the Presidential Burial Site Act, which is basically subsidiary legislation, which prescribed the area where presidents are supposed to be buried. And all our former heads of state, starting from Kenneth Kaunda, Rupia Banda, Frederick Chiluba, Levi Patrick Mwanawasa, were buried there. Okay? Now, if you have a Presidential Burial Site Act, impliedly you are basically saying it's a place where presidents or former presidents are supposed to be buried. That aside, in terms of legislation, I should make it very clear, Naledi, that we have case law in Zambia as one of the fundamental sources of law. And in the case of Kaweche versus Kenneth Kaunda, the court in that judgment was instructive that the president is not a private person. The matter arose when there was contestation as to where President Kenneth Kaunda needed to be buried. The family of President Kenneth Kaunda wanted Kenneth Kaunda to be buried at his village. President Edgar Lungu and his administration contested the position of the family. And the court ruled that in public interest, the president is not a private person and therefore needed to be given a dignified send-off, which of course befits a former head of state.
Okay.
This is the case that has brought us to where we are today.
So,
and we are saying the hypocrisy is coming from the same people who contested the position of where to bury KK. That's why the hypocrisy is. The issue is not whether Edgar Lungu was recognized as president or not. It is the issue that borders on what is the current state of affairs with regard to case law, where we are confronted with a similar situation, as the case may be. The position is that a similar situation has a ruling in Zambia, and the ruling is that in public interest, the president is not a private person.
Okay. Because of this,
yes.
So, Mr. Simuuwe, when you talk about this Presidential Burial Site Act, so now we're talking about legislation, law. So, from your perspective, then, when we speak to the main opposition Secretary General last night, saying that they simply do not want the former president to make his remains to be taken back to Zambia, the family's position that they will decide how they bury the family. Is that in and of itself then considered a criminal act by the family and by the opposition, considering that you are citing law?
There is no criminality at all. In the first place, what we are being presented with is not very strange. When the engagement process in a civil conversation has failed, the most civil way of resolving disputes of this nature is to seek legal redress. And this is what the government of the Republic of Zambia has done. They tried using different envoys to reach out to the former first family. The former vice president, Enoch Kavindele, was engaged as one of the envoys to engage the former first family. We also had some traditional leadership that were engaged to also help deal with this particular matter. The problem we have is not entirely the family. It is the political trajectory that it has taken, where vouchers through rhetoric would want to relish on the death of ECL to mirror the expectations of 2026 elections. And you've heard them say, we will only exhume the body when the next president is elected next year. Where we stand, we know that we do not have any competitor. Now, I should make it very clear that where we are, the matter is in court there, and we hope that the wish of the Zambian people is granted. There is no country under the sun, even South Africa, that would accept or tolerate a situation where one who once ruled the country is buried in another country. It is a serious assault on Zambia's sovereignty. It is also a serious assault on the rights of citizens to give a dignified send-off to their former head of state.
Yeah.
We may have different political affiliations, but when death strikes, it is an African culture that people need to unify, and that is the unity that the president of Zambia has been calling for peace, unity, and a civil way of engaging each other. So there is no criminality that arises, because in Zambia, case law is as good as legislation, because it's a source of law and it can be used as a basis for making decisions when facts are similar. So where we stand, we believe we are on firm ground. We are on firm ground. We must obviously be realistic, and common sense would require that. There is no country that can allow that. Not even South Africa, where you are. Imagine, God forbid, President Ramaphosa dies in Zambia, and then the family says he'll be buried here. Where you are there, you are aware that even the freedom fighters, the ANC freedom fighters, who were buried in Zambia, there are these decisions that have been undertaken to exhume the remainings and take them to South Africa, which the Zambian government has respected because of the history that we share with South Africa. I do not think that we should have a problem on this particular matter.
That's an interesting point around freedom fighters. In fact, Mr. Nakachinda raising that as an example. And of course, I did want to raise the issue but now we're talking about a former statesman. But he also, in our discussion yesterday, talked about the challenges that Zambia faces, and I think this speaks to the political argument that you've been making, that they're using this moment to take on a political agenda, where he says the economic trajectory of Zambia did look better under the leadership of former President Lungu, and that the country simply isn't in the best hands at the moment, citing all sorts of economic challenges. I don't know what you make of that argument, the timing of it at this period, but it also, I think, speaks to what the Patriotic Front looks like within Zambia, its strength. You, Sir, Mr. Simuuwe, saying that your own party not having competition in the upcoming elections.
Absolutely. Let me first of all put matters into context.
Okay.
When UPND was taking over leadership in 2021, we found a highly indebted country. I'm sure you're aware of that Zambia, during the COVID, is the first country to default in 2020 on external debt. It's on record. Secondly, our GDP was negative 2.7. As I speak to you now, there are statistics that have come out. Our GDP is about 4%. Okay? Then secondly, the Lungu administration imposed employment freeze. They were only doing replacements, meaning there was no more employment of youths in the country. We have unlocked that. I'm sure you know that the entire Southern Africa. In a year, we were able to recruit 30,000 teachers. Today, as we speak, over 45,000 teachers in 3 years have been recruited, which has never happened from the time Zambia gained independence in 1964. Thirdly, we had the local municipalities workers who were owed 7 to 15 months salary arrears. When UPND took over leadership, the same year, we cleared all the salary arrears. Fourthly, under the Lungu administration, there was, apparently, there are meal allowances for university students for 2 public universities. At the time of ECL, they decided to scrap them off, that they were not sustainable. Our argument as opposition then was that there's a relationship between nutrition and education. When we took over leadership, we reinstated meal allowances and extended them to all public universities in Zambia. So to put it on record, all public universities in Zambia have meal allowances. Then there were rigidities surrounding the education sector. There was no free education in Zambia. Today, as we speak, under President HH, there's free education from grade 1 up to 12. And now government is studying the possibilities of extending it up to university level. That is a milestone for us.
Okay.
The other thing that I want to bring out, which is very critical, is for us to mention that in the health sector alone, we have so far recruited over 18,000 in 3 years health workers.
Okay.
These include nurses, doctors, to mention but a few.
Yeah.
And as things stand, you know very well that even if we were hit by the drought in the previous season, there were mitigation measures that were introduced under President UPND Hichilema's administration. Some of them include what we call cash for work, where the underprivileged across the country are given money upon given meager works as a way of empowering them.
Okay.
There is also what we call social cash transfer, among other activities.
All right. So let me step in, because I know that you're going to go through all the government programs. That's going to be quite a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to unpack facts.
This is why it was important, because these are arguments that were put forward yesterday by Mr. Nakachinda. But let's get back to former President Lungu. I mean, we did see last week the Zambian government releasing a statement wherein they announced that the mourning period in Zambia is being ended after it had been suspended. But I did note that at the end of that statement, the statement saying that, noting that President Lungu still very much is, a son of Zambia, if you will, and should return back home, there was a sense that the statement was saying, let's talk, right, to the Patriotic Front and to the Lungu family. Is there a role to be played, though, by the United Party for National Development, the ruling party? Now, if we step away from government and say, well, could it be a party-to-party discussion? What would that look like?
Well, you need to also understand and appreciate that the party stands with President Hichilema's position with regard to a civil way of sincere conversation. And that is what we are advocating for. So the idea to put a stop to the barrier in South Africa is there to pave way for more engagements as far as we are concerned, and failure to which obviously the court has to make a decision. But suffices to also mention that where we stand, as I mentioned to you, that we do not have a contender in the opposition. There is fragmentation of the opposition. Even the Nakachinda you are talking about as Secretary General. Within the Patriot Front, there are other Secretary Generals. There is infighting. They don't recognize him. There is another faction that is recognized by the courts in Zambia as a legitimate leadership of the Patriot Front and not Nakachinda. So you can see that when we engage Nakachinda, there could be others that we are going to interview coming from the opposition. So where we stand, we have had so far over 60 by-elections, over 65 by-elections. Out of that total number of by-elections, opposition have only won less than 7 by-elections. It has never happened in the history of this country. So you can see that we literally have no contender.
Okay.
Where we stand.
All right.
And right
I need
now,
to squeeze, apologies, I need to squeeze one last in. Yes, and I'll let you finish that thought, but I do want to squeeze this one. It's important because, again, that the moment South Africa is holding on to the remains of a former statesman of a neighboring country. So as you finish the thought that you were starting about what is coming up in the next few hours, I think you were saying, but what is it that South Africa then does at this time? What do you suggest South Africa does and says?
Of course, in the spirit of brotherhood, and obviously this goes to the ANC, our colleagues, one of the things that are prudent is for them to put themselves in our shoes. What if we had a former head of state, South African former head of state in Zambia died, and then our friends, the ANC, reach out to us that please, that is our former head of state, would want him buried here. What would they do? If they believe that it would not be prudent for that former head of state to be buried in Zambia, the same should apply under the circumstances. What we are saying is that we have to appeal to our conscience and conclude that even posterity will judge us harshly. What we are doing is to open a Pandora's box, assuming that ECL is buried there. The moment any other country in SADC region is going to disagree with the ruling party, you will see this trend growing. We are planting a seed of discord that will haunt us someday, which I believe we should never allow. The most prudent thing to do is to get back to the table, engage with the former first family, and also they do understand that, above all, precedents and legislation should override family interest when it concerns the former head of state.
Yeah, incredibly important tonight. A very direct message there to the South African government. If you were to, I mean, the Lungu family is here in South Africa and may very well be watching as we speak. Your message to them directly.
Well, our message is that they are Zambians. Assuming that they decided to bury there, they'll still come back to Zambia. And where we stand, we still extend an olive branch to them. That time is not all lost. It's time for them to reflect. The President of the Republic of Zambia has extended an olive branch to them and is saying, let us have President Edgar Lungu be given a dignified send-off like his predecessors. We have the presidential burial site in the country for the Republic of Zambia, and we should go by the rules of precedence. So that's the message. It will be, I know that it's not the entire family when such things arise who disagree with the things that are being proposed. There are very specific individuals that could be in disagreement for reasons best known to themselves. Yeah. But we want to appeal to their conscience that posterity will judge us harshly if we make decisions out of emotions.
Right.
Because even if we go and bury former President ECL using emotions, we'll still come back here. And people will still be asking questions. What really transpired for a former head of state to be buried in another country? It would be one of its kind. We must have better reasons, and not those that will only exacerbate the divisions that are being proposed by those that don't mean well.
Yeah. Right. Mr. Simuuwe, we have appreciated your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Mr. Mark Simuuwe, there, Media Director for the ruling party in Zambia. Of course, that's the United Party for National Development. As we keep a close eye on the matter of the former Zambian President Edgar Lungu, whose remains are still here in South Africa.